Talk about the India-Australia ECTA, that part of it where Indian goods or exports have duty-free access to Australian markets. I'm joined by Professor Abhijit Das, former head of WTO Center at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Thank you, Professor Das, for being on it. Let me begin by opening you. How will this help Indian exports?
Amritpal, first and foremost, thanks a lot for having me on your show, and let me wish you and our viewers a wonderful
Yeah,
2026.
wishing you a very happy new year too, sir.
Thank you. Let's recall that in 2022, India and Australia signed the ECTA, and this started getting implemented in December 2022. If we look at how the bilateral trade ties have evolved, one thing is very clear that subsequent to the implementation of the ECTA, Indian exports to Australia have increased quite substantially. They used to comprise about 1.5% of India's export basket prior to the implementation of the ECTA. Now it's almost 2 percentage points.
Okay.
So that is a very significant rise. And we need to bear in mind that given the present geo-economic situation, where every country is trying to diversify, India did get an advantage by signing and implementing this agreement with Australia well before many other countries. We must also remember that this is one of the very rare agreements that is focused on trade issues, trade in goods and services. It does not have contentious issues such as labor, environment, gender, mainly the other non-trade issues, which our agreements, for example, with UK or what we are negotiating with European Union, what they contain. So I would consider the ECTA agreement that we finalized in 2022 to be an excellent example of a very well negotiated trade agreement. And we are seeing the fruits of the trade agreement. Our exports are rising. And in fact, today is the date when Australia will allow all Indian exports into Australia duty free.
But is it reciprocal, Professor Das? Do the Indian markets also now have, can the Australian exports are also duty free?
Not the entire Australian exports. And we have to acknowledge the excellent work done by our trade negotiators, whereby under the agreement, they managed to exclude some of the sensitive products in agriculture, particularly dairy sector or a large number of fruits and vegetables, where there was an apprehension that low-priced imports from Australia entering in the Indian market duty-free could harm the interests of Indian farmers, Indian dairy producers. Those products will not enter India duty-free. So this is all part of a well-thought-out, very well-negotiated.
And the Aussies haven't, the Australians haven't kept any sectors which you do not have, on which you are levied duty. Any or all sectors you can export to them duty-free? No tariffs at all?
No tariffs at all any longer.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the very important aspect of the implementation of this agreement. And what we also need to focus attention on is what are we importing from Australia? Mainly raw material, which we require for our industrialization, which will make our domestic production and our exports more price competitive. These include mineral fuels, these include pearls, semi-precious stones, as well as some ores. So that again, I would think is a very big win for the Indian trade sector as a whole.
Okay. Professor Das, where does the trade balance stand as of today? And with the coming into effect of these, no levy of tariffs or duty, how will it help in that correction?
I would not be too worried about trade balance in our bilateral trade with Australia. Our imports from Australia during 25 24-25 was about 15.5 billion. Our exports were about 8.5 billion. So clearly the trade balance is in Australia's favor. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, out of the roughly about $15.5 billion of goods that we import from Australia, close to 12 billion are imports that we require because these are raw materials to drive our industrialization. So when it comes to Australia, I would not be too worried about the trade imbalance. And there's another dimension to it. Australia is a country which is very well endowed, very rich with critical minerals, which are really high in demand globally because of their contribution to modern technology, to decarbonization efforts of countries. And Australia has lithium, Australia has cobalt, Australia has rare earths. You name it, Australia has most of these. So if we are able to import these critical, will help impart an important, significant momentum to our own industrialization process at a time when all countries, particularly the developed countries, are seeking to grab critical minerals. Our bilateral partnership with Australia could give us some advantages. So the short point which I want to highlight is that trade balance may not be in our favor. It
Okay.
might even worsen in the future, but that is not a point to be worried about as far as India-Australia trade goes.
Okay,
Because
I get
most
that.
of
Yeah, valid point, Professor Das. But why are our exports going down? Our imports are increasing. I understand you say we need those things, but why are our exports going down despite, you know, a favorable ECTA, as you say, in our favor? It's been well negotiated, but then why did last year the imports fell? No, sorry,
no,
exports fell.
exports actually haven't gone down. If we look at figures prior to the implementation of the ECTA and the figures now, then as I mentioned earlier, Australia's weightage in our export basket has actually increased from 1.5% to about 2%. So overall, I would say that our exports really have done fairly well, and they are poised to do much better during 2026.
But
For the
between October 24 and October 25, the exports of India decreased by $5.3 million. That's phenomenal. I mean, about 55% drop. Why was that so?
if you look at slightly different months, if you look at the financial year, then our exports during 2022-23 to Australia were about $6.9 billion, 23-24 $7.9 billion, 24-25 $8.5 billion.
Okay.
So if we take the financial year, then our exports have actually increased.
Okay, okay.
And the reason why I say they are poised to increase further in coming year and subsequent years is that from 2026 onwards, our exports in the labor intensive sectors, textiles and clothing, wearing apparel, made ups, they will now enter Australia duty free. And that is a source of our strength. So I will be very optimistic that because of our exports entering Australia duty free, all products 2026 should see a significant surge
Okay.
in the export performance.
All right. And what sectors are most likely to benefit, Professor Das, before I let go of you?
Certainly, the textile and clothing sector would benefit, gems and jewelry, leather sectors, and bear in mind that these are employment generating sectors, these are labor intensive.
Right.
So, there is enough ground for being very optimistic about India Australia trade, particularly from the export side. And on the import side, if we see a bump in our imports from Australia of critical minerals, that would only be good news for our industrial efforts.
All right. We leave it there. Professor Abhijit Das, thank you very much for being on the show and lending us your insights.